Welcome to our first cataloging webinar of the year, and today we're going to be talking about item attributes. My plan this year is to do several different cataloging related webinars that are each focused on sort of smaller portions of the cataloging process. Last year I think we kind of tried to do lots of things in single webinars, and this year I'm trying to break it up into smaller chunks so that it's maybe a little bit more manageable. So today we're really going to be focused on item attributes and that aspect of the holdings editor. And our agenda is pretty short today, actually. We're going to start talking about what item attributes are, the different categories, and how each of them interacts with circulation and hold policies in order to have the items function as needed in Evergreen. After that, we're going to talk about templates. It is possible to make templates of these item attributes, item attributes records, I guess. And so I'll talk about how you can make those templates and then also how you can share them with colleagues. And then finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time digging into some of the different statistical options within these attributes. And so we're going to talk about tags or digital book plates, notes, and statcats, and why you might want to use each of them, what the differences are, and what they can do for you. So to get started, we're going to talk about what item attributes actually are. Item attributes allow you to set parameters by which the item will actually function within your library. And so what this really means is that the item attributes tab allows you to add metadata to the item, so not the bib record, but the individual copy record, the one with the barcode, that tells Evergreen exactly what you need to do, what it needs to do with that item when somebody attempts to do anything with it, whether that's to check it out, check it in, or place a hold on it. So there are a number of different ways that the item attributes screen interacts with the existing circulation policies and hold policies that we create within the administrative side of Evergreen. So we'll talk a lot about how each of the different attributes interplays with those policies. The nice thing about the item attribute screen is that it is fairly customizable. You can select preferences for what you want to see within that screen. And of course, as I said, you can create templates. Now, the attributes themselves, there are 5 categories, and each of them tells you a little bit about what the different attributes in that category will do. So the first one is identification. This is your metadata about the item. Of course, your MARC record is going to give you metadata about the title itself, but then when you want to drill down to the metadata about an individual copy, you can get that in this identification category. The location category tells you where to find the item. Some of these indicators also do interact with those policies as well, though, because different aspects of the location are going to determine which circulation policies are hit. Then, of course, there is the circulation category itself, where most of the information about how an item circulates is set. Miscellaneous basically talks about how the different item interacts with different functions in Evergreen. And then statistics, this is data that you can add to help with reporting or other functions. The identification attributes. The copy status is editable from the drop-down menu. The barcode is set in the holding screen and it may be unified. The creation date is set automatically upon creation, and the active date is set automatically when attributes are saved for the first time. The creator is set automatically as well, and that's going to be based on the user login. And then the last edit date is set automatically at first, and then each subsequent save, it will be reset. And then the last editor will be the same. So it's going to be set automatically based on the user login each time those attributes are saved. So let's take a look at this in Evergreen. So I'm going to come in here to Evergreen and I'm going to pull up an item attribute screen. And so there are several different ways that you can get to the item attribute screen. If you have a barcode, you can get to it from circulation under the item status. And so you can scan your barcode and then you can go in to edit the item from that item status screen. You can also get it to it from the bib record, and that's what I'm going to do here. So when you're in the bib record, you can come down here to your holdings, and you can find the exact barcode that you wanted to look at, and you can click on edit, and that's going to take you into it. If you also wanted to add a new copy of this, and that's what we're going to do now, you can click add holdings from the bib record. And this allows you to add those holdings, which includes adding the item attributes. Now, one of the things that I said is that you do have the ability to unify the holding screen with the item attribute screen. The default is to have them as two separate tabs, which you can see here. But I know that most of our catalogers actually prefer to unify them, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to do that by clicking on my Preferences tab. And I'm going to select Unified Holdings and Item Attributes Display. And you can see that right away, I've gone down to just two tabs. I've got the Holdings tab and the Preferences tab where I am now. So if I go into my Holdings tab, I can see at the top the regular holdings information where I would, put in my barcode and my call number. And then below, these are the items attributes. So if this was not unified, this is what you would find in that Item Attributes tab. But most of our our catalogers, as I said, do prefer to unify these. So from here, when I am talking about my identification attributes, you can see all of those here in this leftmost column. Now the copy status, this can be set manually, but some statuses are going to be set based on a transaction. So if an item is checked out, the copy status will automatically be changed to checked out. Whereas if it's checked in, it'll automatically change to available. A lot of those automatic status changes cannot be overridden manually. So you can't come in here to the copy status if it is set as checked out. You can't come in here and manually set it to available. However, if it's available, you can manually set it to be in cataloging or damaged or something like that. So you do have the ability to manually set as long as it is not in a status that cannot be changed manually. And we do have information about what those statuses are in our knowledge books. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and set this to available, and I'm going to click apply. And for the most part, when you are in this screen, that's what you'll need to do is once you've set something, you'll need to click apply to have it actually be accepted. And you can see that it's been accepted because it's turned green. Now the barcode right here, you can see it's unset. I can click in here and nothing happens because the barcode is not actually added at this point. I have to come up here to my holdings editor where I can actually put in my call number and a barcode. And then when I do that, you'll see that my barcode has automatically appeared here in my item attributes screen. Creation date also is unset, and once again I can click in here but I can't do anything. This will be automatically set when I scroll down to the bottom and click apply all and save. Same with active date. So active date will be set almost always to match the creation date, and then creator is going to be set based on the username that I am logged in under, which you can see up here in the top right corner. So those are all going to be set automatically. And then, of course, edit date and last editor will match the creation date and the creator the first time I save it. But if somebody else were to come in here and edit this, then the edit date would update to the date that they did that, and then the editor would update to reflect their username. So for the most part, the identification column does not allow a lot of manual work. You can change the copy status most of the time, but everything else is set based on a different action that you're taking. In the case of the barcode, based on whatever you do in your holdings editor, and everything else based on who clicks save and when they click it, basically. So that brings us to our second column here, which is the locations column. And the locations column is going to have the shelving location. And it's important to note that this is not just directional information in this case. It's not just to help the patron figure out which area of the library this item is held in, though it does do that. It is also a really important part of circulation policies. So circulation policies are based in part on where an item is shelved. So you may have one circulation policy for adult fiction and another one for adult new fiction or something like that. Circulating library is also going to impact those Circ policies as well, because where the item circulates can be part of a circulation policy. But this also tells you where the barcode will be shelved and checked in and out. Now, this often matches the owning library, but it doesn't actually have to. So the owning library is the library that owns the call number. And there are some libraries in our system that will do something where, maybe all items are owned at a central location, and then different branches circulate them for a period of time. And they may occasionally even shift that. So titles that circulate at one library for 6 months, then may go to a different library to circulate for the next 6 months. This is also really common, of course, with bookmobiles and other outreach locations. It's also possible to set up floating, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but floating allows you to have one library that owns the item, and then wherever that item is checked in, it automatically becomes the circulating library for that item. And then, of course, the copy number. This is probably the most purely informational part within this column. And so that's something where you can put in if you have multiple copies of the same title, where you can put a copy number in. So if we come up here to our holdings editor and we look at our location column, you'll see that it's quite short. Now I'm going to go ahead and change my location to adult fiction and apply that. And then my circulating library is currently set to the working location where I am logged in. And my owning library is set to the library that is listed here in my holdings editor, which is also primarily based on the working location where I'm logged in. But if I were to say add or change this location to let's go with South Asheville. And I can come down here and I see that my circulating library remains Black Mountain, but I've now changed my owning library to South Asheville. So as I said, these don't necessarily have to match, and it's based on local policy, whether or not you choose to ensure these always match or you have some other standard way of doing that. Now I'm going to leave the copy number blank. I don't need to add anything here. So our next column here is circulation. And circulation is really kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're doing here in the item attributes screen. The circulation column is where we're really setting up how this item is going to function. As I said, there are certainly things within that location column that impact circulation policies, but this is where things get really really detailed in terms of those circulation policies. So the first thing is, of course, can it circulate at all? So this is an important flag, because if you have a circulation policy that this item would fall under most of the time, but this flag is not set to yes, then that's going to override that circulation policy. Meaning that if I have a regular adult fiction book that in all other ways should circulate as an adult fiction book, but somebody brings it up to the desk to check it out, and this flag is set to no, that checkout is actually not going to go through. So it's really important to make sure that this is set correctly. And of course, if we see in our holdings editor, the default is set to yes. So it would take kind of a definite mistake on the part of the cataloger to have this set to no. But just something to keep in mind if you are looking at maybe having specific items, maybe for a display or something like that, set to not circulate, rather than trying to create some sort of policy for that. You can just take the circulation flag off those specific items. That's a possibility. Holdable is very similar to can circulate. This basically says that this item can be selected to fulfill a hold. So it's a little bit different than the circulation one. So once again, it's similar in that if a policy would otherwise fit an item, then it still will not be triggered if this flag is not set to yes. But the patron's still going to be able to place that hold. It's just this item will never be targeted to capture that hold. So, just something to kind of keep a slight nuance to keep in mind. Now, age hold protection, we do get some questions about this. Age hold protection is how long the item will be kept in system for holds, meaning that if you have, a multi-branch system, your new materials may circulate within your branches, but it's not going to go out to other libraries for resource sharing. This is measured from activation date. So age hold protection is actually sort of a two-factor situation. I keep doing that. So the first factor is in this circulation column, you are determining whether or not age hold protection should be applied. And you can choose either for 3 months or 6 months. So if you set that, then when somebody comes to place a hold on this item, Evergreen will see that this item should be protected for 6 months. But then the second factor of that, Evergreen will come back here to the activation date, and it will be looking for 6 months past that activation date. So simply having the 6-month flag here does not in and of itself put something under age hold protection. It also has to have an activation date that is less than 6 months old, which is why that sometimes you'll come into an older item and take a look at the item attribute screen and you'll see that it still has this flag applied. That does not mean that that item is continuing to be protected by this. It just means that the flag was never removed, but it's not going to in any way impact those holds because the activation date is more than 6 months old. So you don't need to worry about coming in and manually removing this flag after 6 months or anything like that. I think we do have a process that potentially removes that regularly. Yep, Benjamin confirmed that we do have a process. Oh, in fact, he had said that in the chat. So it does remove that flag every night. So, you definitely don't have to worry about it. But the key thing to remember is that there's two factors involved in this protection. There is the fact that you've turned it on, and then there is the date it actually checks to see whether or not the item falls within that parameter. Now we're going to come back and talk about floating groups in just a few minutes. I want to get through some of the other attributes in this column first. The first one that I wanted to show is loan duration. This one is a little bit confusing for some people because there are 3 duration options here: short, normal, and long. But those don't actually define anything. The actual time periods are defined in the library circulation policies. So if I come in here and I choose a loan duration of short, that won't actually do anything unless I have a circulation policy that says adult fiction at Buncombe that can circulate and that has a circulation modifier of book. We'll get to that. Will typically hit this circulation policy. Now, this circulation policy in and of itself can have a loan duration applied of, say, 21 days. That policy can also have a loan duration applied that says normal is 21 days and short is 14 days. So I can come in here at the item level and say, when this item is checked out, use the short duration on this policy, versus when another item that has the normal level selected, use the normal circulation policy. So that's a little bit confusing because it does require having specialized circulation policies set up. So you can't just decide to come in and have, all of your James Patterson books circulate for a shorter period than the others, than your other adult fiction. You would have to set up those policies first and then come in and apply the short duration to the item attributes for each of those items. But if that's something you're interested in, we can definitely help you set it up. Fine level is very similar in that you have a low, normal, or high, and this basically is going to refer to the exact same fine policy that's being applied, but rather than having a single fine level of, say, 10 cents per day, you have the normal policy is 10 cents per day, but a low policy is 5 cents per day. So once again, you can choose specific fine levels to apply to only specific items within a collection that would otherwise always get a standard fine level. So if you wanted to have, maybe books that cost more than $50, we'll have a fine level of 15 cents per day rather than 10. Then you can set up that policy with us to have both of those options available. And then on those items, when you catalog them, you can set the high fine level for them. So it gives you a little bit more control at the point of actually cataloging. So if you have some items that are otherwise very similar to everything else, where they're shelved and everything like that, you want them to generally follow the same policies as other similar items, but you only want them to be checked out for a shorter amount of time, or you want to apply lower fine levels to them. You can do that at the point of cataloging those items, but you do have to have the policies set up ahead of time. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about those? All right. So that's something that you can request if you'd like to try it out. Now, the last two fields here are circulation type and circulation modifier. Circulation type basically overrides the fixed field for the item type or for the material type in the MARC record. So if you have something that the bib record itself has classified as, say, an audiobook, but you would like to have it set to be, mixed materials instead, you can put that on here. It won't make a huge difference, that when somebody does a search in the catalog, they're still going to get whatever the bib record has listed as the format icon. But it could have some impacts on how things circulate. So you do have the option to kind of override whatever is in that fixed field in the bib record by simply put it in here. So for a single item, where it is otherwise makes sense to attach it to a certain bib record, but you want it to be sort of classified differently in your library, you can do that here. And then the big one, the circulation modifier. This is really important. I've actually had several tickets recently where something has not been checking out properly, and we realize it's because a circulation modifier had not been applied to that item. So it's not uncommon for this to be missed, but it will mess up the actual circulation of that item. So it's really important that you include this. So the circulation modifier basically tells Evergreen what this item is and how to treat it. So we have circulation policies set up for your library that may be, books circulate for this amount of time, videos circulate for this amount of time, hotspots circulate for this amount of time. This is how Evergreen knows what type of item it is, so which circulation policy to apply. So it's really important that you add this and that it's correct. I'd say our most common ones are probably audiobook, book, and video, but we do have libraries that use every single one of these. If there are some, if you get a new item type in that you would like to circulate very differently than anything else you have, usually the best way to do that is to determine, which Circ modifiers you're not using and choose one of those to use for this particular item. So, if you're not using games and you get a whole bunch of puzzles in and you want those to only circulate for 5 days or something like that, completely different than everything else you have, we can start using the Circ modifier of game to apply to that item type, and then you will be able to set up a circulation policy just for those. So it's the Circ policy or the Circ modifier is a really important part of how Evergreen determines how something's going to circulate. So make sure that you're always including that. So I'm going to add my Circ modifier of book here. And my loan duration is going to be normal, and I can circulate and I can hold. I've got 6-month age hold protection, and we'll get back to floating. Any questions about any of those circulation attributes? This is kind of arguably the most important column to get right. I think all the attributes to a certain extent are fairly important, but this is the one that really impacts how something's going to function. All right, so let's talk about floating. I've mentioned it a few times, and I said briefly what that was early on, but let's talk about what it actually is and work on applying it a little bit. So when an item circulating library changes based on where an item is checked in, it's referred to as a floating item. So, a library may choose to do this with all of their branches, where simply if an item is checked out at one branch, it's returned to the other. It lives at that branch. My home library actually does that, the library that I go to. And so that allows the books to kind of end up living where they're popular, if that makes sense. Other libraries may do this in a limited basis for only certain item types or only certain branches. So they may have it set up for, maybe their outreach or bookmobile items. They want those to go right back into circulating at a brick and mortar library if they're returned there, rather than transiting back to the bookmobile upon being returned at a physical location. Floating, just like some of the other things we've talked about, does take 2 steps. So the first one is that you have to have a floating group set up. So if you come in here to the floating group, you'll see the ones that we have set up already. If your library is interested in this, then you can contact us about getting a floating group set up for your library based on what your needs are. So in this case, I'm going to set this item to the Buncombe local float and apply it. So you can see that right now its owning library is South Asheville and its circulating library is Black Mountain. Now that I have the floating group applied, if a patron comes into Black Mountain, checks out this book, and then returns it at South Asheville, it's going to go ahead and be shelved at South Asheville. If they return it at PAC, it's going to be shelved at PAC. And I'm going to go ahead and, we'll look at this on a different item so you can see it in action. So I'm going to take this existing Black Mountain copy of this book, and I'm just going to come in here and find a patron. And I'm currently logged in at Black Mountain. So as far as Evergreen's concerned, that's where I am right now. So I'm going to come into this patron's account, and I've got my barcode. I'm going to check this item out to her. And now I'm going to change my workstation. Actually, I'm going to come into an incognito window and change my workstation. Are you able to see the incognito window now? I'm sorry, was that a yes?
That was a yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, that'll just be easier because I won't lose what I've been working on in my other window. So I'm going to log in at PAC now instead. So that's a different branch within Buncombe. And I'm going to check the item in at the PAC branch. So remember, we applied Buncombe float to this particular item. It was checked out at Black Mountain. Now I've checked it in, and you can see that it is being routed to adult new fiction. And if I go into the item itself, let's take a look at what's going on here. Oh, I know what happened. We're going to start this over. I didn't save. So floating, I applied it, but I didn't save it. So now I'm going to save this one. I applied float to. Okay, so this one is going to be Buncombe local float, apply and save. And then I'm going to check the item out to Sarah Smith at Black Mountain. And now we're going to come into PAC and we are going to check the item in. So it's routed to adult new fiction. And if we come in here, now we see that it's circulation library is PAC. So sorry about that. It's very important to save. It's also very important to remember which window you were working in. So basically by applying that float, I've made it so that when an item is returned at a different library within the defined floating group, that library automatically becomes its circulating library. So rather than, transiting back to Black Mountain, it's now going to just be shelved at PAC till somebody else checks it out. And then wherever they return it within Buncombe, that's where it's going to continue to live. So if this is something that you're interested in, you can let us know. We'd be happy to set up a float group for you. Right. Any questions about floating? All right. Let's see, I'm going to close these extra tabs so I make sure that I'm working in the exactly correct item attribute screen. All right, so that leaves us with our next column as miscellaneous attributes. So we've been through all the circulation attributes and seen how an item is going to circulate. Within miscellaneous, we're primarily looking at how the item is going to interact with other aspects of Evergreen. So the main transaction that items will go through will be checking in or checking out, so circulation, but there are a number of other things that may happen to an item over the course of its lifetime at a library, and for the most part, that's where miscellaneous comes into. So you can add item alerts, and these are temporary notes that will appear upon an action. And so you can set the type of action that would be. It may be a checkout or a check-in. They generally are not going to have any sort of impact on that action. So they're not necessarily going to block a checkout, but they'll be visible when an item is checked out. It is possible to set them to have an impact, and we'll look at that. So if I come in here to my add item alerts, I can click in here. And so like a lot of other things in Evergreen, you basically have two different fields here. You have a predefined list to choose from, and then you have a free text field that you can put in whatever text you need here. So with my predefined list, I'm basically determining where this alert or how this alert is going to function. Is this going to be an alert that comes up at a checkout, but allow that checkout to proceed normally? It'll be an alert that comes in at check-in, but allow the check-in to proceed normally, etc. I can come down here and I can see that there are some existing ones that have to do with, the checkout of a lost copy. You've all probably seen this before, where you're checking an item out and it was marked as lost and you get a little error message. So you see that there are a lot of these available, and these are going to actually require some amount of override to work. But most of the normal ones will not require that. They'll just be a message that pops up. So for this one, I could say, set it at a normal checkout, and I could say damage predates this checkout. Maybe there's a little bit of damage. It's still in perfectly good condition to circulate, but we don't want to accidentally charge somebody for damage that existed on the item prior to their checking it out. These alerts can be temporary, which means that the first time that this alert pops up, somebody sees it, they clear it, and then it's never going to show up again. If you do not check the temporary box, this note will show up every time an item is checked out. Once I've filled in both my type and my free text field, I would click Add New. And then I see that this is pending. Once I click Apply, then this item alert will actually be on this item. And then that's going to show up in future transactions. Now deposit, this is not something that's used a lot, but it does exist. This allows you to charge patrons to borrow an item. So you may have a certain type of maybe very expensive equipment that you'd like people to put a deposit down on before they can check it out. Or, a specific title or something like that you just want to make sure that you're getting people to bring it back, and so you want to add that deposit. So this is this deposit can be added to an item here in the attributes. Basically what happens is you have to do two different fields. First, you have to require the deposit, so you would have to change this to yes, and then you have to determine what that deposit amount is. And what will happen is that when the patron comes to check it out, that amount will automatically be added to their account as a bill. So, this may be a thing where maybe you never actually intend to charge anybody, but you want to block a patron's account from being able to check out further items while they have this one checked out. So you could have a deposit amount that is higher than your max fine amount, and basically allow patrons to check this item out, but then they're blocked from checking out anything else until they've brought it back. I'm not sure that really fits in the spirit of libraries for the most part, but it is an option. And so we do have a few libraries that use this on very specific item types, but it's not commonly used. But this is how you would apply that if you wanted to. I'm not going to, so I'm going to clear that and clear that. And so now you can see that it's unset, and this bright orange color lets me know that that unset was not the default unset, but instead was done manually. Now, price and cost. I'm going to kind of skip over these two in between so I can talk about price and cost together because this does cause confusion sometimes. Price is the amount that you will charge a patron for a replacement. Cost is the amount that you paid for the item. And these two amounts may not match. So you may have paid, $15 for an item because you got a great discount, but its actual price that you would charge a patron is $20. We do have libraries that have sort of a standard price that they set for item types. So, all paperbacks are $15, all hardbacks are $25, and they just set that across the board regardless of what they paid for it. If you are using the acquisitions module at all, then the cost field is actually going to be filled in automatically for you as part of the acquisitions process. If you are not using that, then you can put this in manually, or technically you can leave it blank. So you might want to keep track of this sort of for your own records, but the one that you need to have is price. So price is important because that is what Evergreen will use if a patron loses or damages the item. That's the amount that will automatically be charged based on what your library settings are. You may have additional settings that would add processing fees or something like that, or you may have a setting that says all lost items are charged the same amount regardless. But unless you have one of those settings, then Evergreen will automatically charge whatever you have set in this price field. So the cost field, you can leave that blank unless you'd like to keep record of it, but the price field does need to be filled in. Now, OPAC visible basically just means that something is going to be visible in the OPAC, meaning the patron view of the item. In most cases, you're going to want to make your items OPAC visible. There may be situations, with your laptops or hotspots or something like that, where you really don't want those coming up in a search that a patron does. So you can make something OPAC invisible by just changing this to no. Now, is reference, this is an important part of circulation policies because in a circulation policy, we do have the ability to add a flag for reference materials specifically. Now, if you are a library that has reference materials and does allow those to circulate, we can set up circulation policies specifically for circulating reference materials. And so that's something that would have to be set up separately from other types of policies, and this flag is part of the reason. Now down here, mint condition, this primarily impacts the holds. So if you have an item that maybe you are comfortable checking it out to your patrons, but you're not sure that it's going to make it through shipping for resource sharing, you can change the mint condition here to damaged. And then when people are placing holds, they can set their condition requirements to good, and anything that has mint condition change to damage will not be targeted to fill that hold. So I know we have had, excuse me, I know we have had some issues in the past where, libraries may get a copy through resource sharing that they don't feel comfortable checking out to a patron due to its damage level. This is a way that you can kind of avoid that without weeding something from your collection if you don't have the ability to replace it just yet. So if you wanted to be able to continue circulating items to your patrons, but you are concerned that they might be too damaged for resource sharing, you can set this. Now the hold request itself will have to request a good copy. So it's not going to fix it across the board, but it certainly can alleviate some of that, some of those issues that we see sometimes. I'm not going to set this to damage for now, though. All right, are there any questions about the miscellaneous column? All right, well, before we move on to the final column, which is statistics, I wanted to talk about templates. So templates are a way for you to do this work in the item attribute screen as quickly as possible. If you have items that you catalog the same way every time, such as adult fiction, creating a template allows you to apply several attributes at once that are always going to be the same for that item type. So creating a template is fairly simple. When you are in this view here, you just come in here to the templates field. Now, the field itself, if you click on it, it's going to give you a drop down of your existing templates already. So you could apply one of those by selecting it, clicking apply, and then that's going to apply any of the fields that are included in that template. If you'd like to create a new one, then instead of selecting a template from that drop down, you'll type the name of the new template in the field. Let's do this adult fiction. Now, before I click save on this template, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select which of these fields I'd like to have standard for this template. So I'm going to set my copy status to available. I'm going to select my shelving location for adult fiction. My circulating library, I will set to always be just set it to be pack. And then my owning library, I'm going to leave so that it'll be set by whatever I have in my holdings editor. Under circulation, the default is can circulate equals yes, but I'm going to go ahead and set that. Same with holdable. It's the default. There's not a whole lot of chance that I'm going to accidentally change that, but just in case, I'm just going to go ahead and set that to yes. And I'm going to have my age hold protection set at 6 months, which it is from that audiobook template that I just pulled up. Floating group, I'm going to go ahead and put my floating group on here. And you can see that they're turning green after I click apply. So that means that I have actually interacted with these fields. It's not just the default. And that's important to note when you're creating a template, because even if every field is basically filled in with a default value, when you save the template, it's only the ones that have turned green. So the ones that you have manually done something to, that will save to that template. So even, this can circulate is a default of yes. If you want that to be part of your template, you would need to come in here and actually actively apply it for it to be included in the template. I'm going to keep my loan duration normal and my fine level normal. And I'm going to leave circulation type blank, and I'm going to change my Circ modifier to book. Let's see, Robert Fleming. Yes, so if you have the same item note that you'd like to place on every item that you catalog using a specific template, you can use item notes and alerts with that template. Let's do that right now. I'll put an alert in. So that's in there, and I believe that'll be included in the template, but we'll find out for sure. Item notes, we haven't talked about those yet, but I believe that's going to be the case as well. So we've added both of those to the template. It didn't turn green, so it's possible that that's not going to be saved in the template. We'll find out. I don't want any of this. My price I'll just set at $25. The rest of this I will set as is. All right, so when I come in here to save, oh, I've got something that's telling me, oh, I don't want to save that. I want to save my template. So I'm going to click up here, the save button up here next to template. And so now I have my adult fiction template. And let's go ahead and pull up a different item. And we'll apply this template now. So I'll come into this item and I will add a new holding. And I'll go ahead and give it my, my call number and a barcode. And so that's automatically going to put that barcode in here. And then I'm going to come to my template list and I'm going to choose adult fiction and apply. And it's going to apply all of those fields that I just did. Let's take a look at the item alert and see if it did. It did not. So no, it looks like you cannot do item alerts or notes in a template. Let's take a look at notes. No. So Robert, unfortunately, it looks like that's not available within a template. Item tags maybe, and we can try that. Again, we have not yet taken a look at these, but we can try just for the sake of the template. So that again did not turn green, so I'm guessing that that's not gonna work. Let's just do one here. Nope, that did not work either. So it looks like none of those are going to be available as part of a template. All right, so we have created a template and saved it and applied it, but we also have the ability to share a template. So, if you have maybe several different item catalogers in your library and you want to make sure that they're all following the same guidelines when doing item attributes, you might create one template that they all use for different item types. Or maybe you just have a really great template and you want to make sure that other people have access to it, because you can share these outside of your own library as well. You do have that ability. So what you would do is from the template owner's account, you're going to navigate into the item attributes page in the holding editor. So this is where we are, and you're going to pull up the template that you want to share. Once it's pulled up, you'll click the import or the export button. And that is going to trigger a download to your computer of a JSON file. So you can go in then once you've downloaded that file and share it in whatever way works for you, whether that is you have a shared drive in your library, or maybe you use Dropbox, or maybe you email a file to somebody. But you're able to then share that file with a colleague. I'm going to pull up another incognito window, and I'm going to log into a different account. And from this account, I'm going to go into catalog again, and I'm just going to do the same thing I've been doing, where I pull up an existing record of some sort. And I'm going to add holdings. And then in this holdings editor, in this completely different account, so I was in admin trained before, now I'm in admin. Under item attributes, I'm going to come here to the import button for the templates. So in this gray bar here for templates, I'm going to click import, and that's going to trigger the opening of a window. So I'm going to go to wherever I, as the receiver of the template, have saved the JSON file that was stored or shared with me. I'm going to find it and open it. And that should have brought it in. Yep. So I can choose adult fiction and apply it. And so that's going to go ahead and apply this adult fiction template that was shared with me. So that's the process of sharing templates. Are there any questions about that? We do get requests for that option a lot. It's fairly straightforward once you know how to do it. Figuring out how to do it is the tricky part, but once you know, the process is pretty simple. All right, so I'm going to close out this incognito window, and I'm going to come back in here. And that brings us to our last column, which is tags, notes, and statcats. This is our statistical column. So if I come back into the holdings editor we've been working on, see, somebody has asked a question. Is there a way to export multiple templates? Ooh, I don't think so. Does anybody else on the Cardinal team know of a way to export multiple templates at once?
Something makes me want to say that when you export them, there are more than one, and there may be an ability to choose which ones you're importing. Yeah, they all export at the same time
Okay.
is what Tamara's saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that actually makes sense because when I was pulling up the adult fiction one in the admin account, I saw an adult fiction tags, which I can't imagine was one that already existed in there. So yes, I think I actually exported all of my templates at once. So good question because I obviously did not know the answer to it because I usually only have one template at a time because I don't, you know, I only do this for training purposes. Um, all right, so our final category here is statistics. And this column is it's a little bit different than the others. It doesn't really have any impact on how an item circulates. Instead, it basically allows you to either create a tag, create a note, or create a stat cat. And these are all just sort of additional bits of information you can add to the item itself rather than to the bib record. But they all function a little bit differently. So tags are custom labels. They are predefined types with free text entries. They are OPAC visible and they are OPAC searchable. So what we are using these for currently are digital book plates. So what that means is that, if you have a donation, and maybe the person who's donated has brought in multiple items and you'd like for this donation to kind of live as a sub-collection within your OPAC, you can put digital book plates on it so that then a patron could theoretically come in and look for all of the items that were donated by this one particular person. And so you would do that by having the predefined type of digital book plate, which already exists for you, and then putting in your own text that designates it as part of that sub-collection. And then a patron could come in and search for that in your OPAC. Now, notes, these are custom details about an item. So generally speaking, they're not going to be, the same thing applied across multiple different items. So with a tag, you're trying to kind of create a searchable collection. Whereas with notes, you may have one item that has a note saying coffee stain on the back page. You may have another one that says autographed by author. So those custom details are the type of thing that are really unique to a single item versus something that you want to use to pull together multiple disparate items. They're completely free text, so unlike the tags, you don't have to start by choosing anything predefined. They are OPAC visible, but they are not OPAC searchable. Stat cats, on the other hand, track categorical data about items. They are predefined categories and labels, so similar to the tags, but they're predefined across the board. There's no option for free text at all. They must be enabled for your org unit. If your org unit does not use these currently, then they probably don't exist for your org unit, and we'd have to create them for you before you can start using them. They can be OPAC visible. Most libraries do not use them in that way, but it is possible. They are not searchable, though. And they're primarily used for reporting. So it's a thing where, maybe you want to indicate all of the items that you order from specific vendors. You may have a stat cat for vendor, and then you could run a report every few months, say, to figure out what the circulation statistics are for items from, say, Ingram. So stat cats basically allow you to create unique statistical categories for items that you may want to report on. So let's take a look at these. The item tags, we'll start by adding a digital bookplate. So you'll see under this first dropdown, digital bookplate is the only option. So it's the only thing that you can choose. But you can enter whatever you want as the label. Now, I do recommend that if you have multiple items that are all going to be sort of tagged together, that you have an external document where you keep track of what the exact text of a tag should be. So, you don't want to have donated by a patron in one item and then something completely different in another item, because then they won't be tagged together. I'm going to do the first one. It made more sense. So you would add the tag and then apply the changes. And so now that's going to be able to show up within the OPAC. So I believe I've got, Franklin County is one of the libraries that currently uses this as an option. So I'll show you how you could actually complete a search for this. So if I come over here to the type dropdown, I can choose digital bookplate from the types. Kelly asked if you can add more than one item tag. Yes, you can. So you can add as many tags as you wanted to. I've already got one on here, but I can come in here and add a second one. And I can, I think I can even add a third one before I even close this. And then I can apply that, and then all of those item tags will apply to this particular item. I can choose digital bookplate from the drop down here for type, and then I can put in, if I was looking for an existing subcollection that I knew of, I could just put in a keyword from that subcollection and search. Oh no. Oh, I'm sorry. I was putting it. So I put in an existing keyword from that subcollection, and I'm going to get all of the items that have that tag. So this is a summer science subcollection that they created at Franklin. And so by searching under digital bookplate and summer, I then get all of the items that have that particular tag added to them. So I can come in here to the actual record. It wants to load. It's like it's slowing down on me here. So I can come into the actual record, and I can see here in the call number and copy notes, I can see digital bookplate science in the summer. So I can see what the full bookplate or tag would read in the record itself. So digital bookplates are a good way to create subcollections. They're useful for donations and things like that, but they can be used for other sort of subcollections as well. Notes, let's look at notes briefly. Notes are a little bit tricky. So if I were to add an item note to this, it's completely free text, so I give it a title of whatever type I want. And then I just add that note. I can make it public, and for the most part, I think I'm not sure that this is what people do with notes, but it does make sense to me to use this as a good way to put, information about an item that you'd like patrons to be able to see in the OPAC. So if I choose public note, that's going to create that. It's going to make it visible in the OPAC. I add my note and I apply changes. That's forbidden in Cardinal. Benjamin, can you clarify that? Because I found a lot of libraries that are doing this.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Item notes are
Depends on
forbidden
the
in
item
Cardinal?
note.
Doing the public item note, we didn't want to do the public item note because it clutters up the view of the items in the item table.
Okay, it does do that when they're really long. A lot of people are doing it anyway. We should probably be aware of that.
Okay.
Because when I was prepping for this, I wasn't going to talk about public item notes, but then I searched and I saw lots of them. So I thought, well, I'll show
Yeah,
them too.
they're technically not supposed to be doing it. It's typically okay though if they're doing, like, say they have an audiobook that's missing a disc, or if it's a like a DVD on a record that the record says that it's 2 discs with an extra disc for special features, but their copy only has the movie disc.
Okay. Yeah,
Or,
that
like,
all makes
you know,
sense.
slight damage, things like that. But anything else, we try to encourage them not to use the item notes. And if they want to put a donation note, we ask that they use the item tags for that.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I do remember that coming up when we were talking about setting up the item tags now. So item notes, you can make them public, but I guess you probably shouldn't. And then stat cats was the final one that I was going to talk about. So stat cats, basically, it's a process to get them set up if you're not already using them, because NC Cardinal would have to set up the categories and choices for your library. As I said, there's no free text for this particular attribute. But once they're set up, then they'll show up on your item attributes page, and then you can choose whether to use them for a specific item or not. You would select from a predefined list only if you actually wanted to record a stat cat for this particular item. If you don't select from that list, you won't record a stat cat. So let's take a look at a library that uses these right now. See, I need to change my workstation, so give me just a second. It's the problem with this particular topic is so much stuff is dependent on how a library has things set up that I have to change my workstation quite a lot. All right, so I am going to be in Rutherford now, and we will move into the holdings view. And so now you'll see all of the different stat cats that have been set up for Rutherford. So if I don't do anything here, then, you know, these two that are unset, there simply won't be anything recorded as a stat cat for this. So if I was creating a new holdings record, then all of these would be unset. I can come in here and change this. So I could change this to a different type of award winner, or I could clear it to unset it. So basically, NC Cardinal has set up both the types, award, donation, lease, and patron purchase request, and then the options to fill in. So there's no free text, as I said, so I can come in here and I can choose any of these options from this dropdown. And so for these yes or no, if I leave it blank, it's going to come up as blank. That doesn't automatically make it a no. And then once I've done that, I can save it, and I'm able to then run reports off of these. Now, it is possible to make some of these OPAC visible. That's probably also something that we don't want people doing, though, now that based on the item note thing is. Will, do you know anything about whether or not we allow these to be OPAC visible?
I don't know that there's a specific prescription against it.
Yeah, I feel like if the concern is cluttering up the view, that would be less of a concern here because it's so prescribed in terms of what they can put. So you can see one here where that's this has a visible stat cat. The stat cat is donation, and the entry is yes. And so you see that right here in the notes. So it's, again, this is not something that I guess we have made a recommendation on one way or the other. It's not heavily used. Most of the stat cats are fully internal, but there are a few libraries that have made some of them visible.
I think it's also probably worth noting that, like with the item tags, we have very specific instructions for how many characters they should be limited to.
Yep.
And since you see here, like with the stat cat has very few characters, it's probably not as much of an issue if a library were to make them public as if they were to make a bunch of item notes public.
Yeah. Well, this is what it looks like when it has been made visible. But this is mostly for the sake of reporting so that you can run circulation reports on items in specific categories that you've selected ahead of time. So you can see how many of your Newbery Award winners have circulated this year and that type of thing. All right, so that actually brings me to the end of what I had to cover. And I believe we are probably, we're 6 minutes over time. But I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions if people do have any. And as usual, I'm also happy to answer follow-up questions via email or Basecamp.